Alright, so what we're going to do right now is we're going to run through with the 70-200. We're going to start at f2.8 and go up to, let's say, f16. So that's going to show you the different depth of field that we'll get with the difference in aperture. And then after that, we're going to show you the different focal lengths and that same effect at one particular aperture. Because all these things are going to give you a little bit different look to your photograph. So if you're shooting a portrait and you don't want much in the background, you're going to want to zoom in. Now, say it's a wedding party or you're shooting a little bit more of a casual portrait, maybe you do want some of that background in. So you're going to want to shoot wider, get more of that in, give a little bit of story to the scene, and then after that you can choose how much you wanted that to be in sharp focus or not. That's the whole point of the depth of field, is to choose your frame. We're going to go through. We're at 70 millimeters at f2.8. We got a little bit of a soft background, but you can still tell what we have going on. We'll hit it at f4, f5.6, f8, f11, f16, and then this lens actually stops all the way down to f32 at a really slow 20th of a second, but you can therefore see how much your depth of field changes just by the aperture. And that's what you got to keep in mind. You got to choose the right aperture for your right photograph. So when we're talking about your aperture, it's actually the diaphragm in the lens that's letting in the amount of light, and that's what we're changing to get parts of our depth of field. So a big wide open aperture, that's going to give you a real shallow depth of field. You close it down, you're going to get a deeper depth of field. Everything will be in focus. Little depth of field, lots of field. Alright, so we're switching lenses. We're switching over to the 35mm f1.8. So we're getting a full extra stop of light, but we're at the same distance away. And I'm going to show you how that changes your framing. So like I said, if you want a group shot of people, that this might be something that you want to look for. Nice shallow depth of field, but you still get a good feeling for the background and where they're at. So it takes in a lot more of the scene, but we want to keep that same framing. We got to move closer to about right here. And then you'll be able to see the difference in the background. They'll actually be fairly similar in the approach of depth of field, but even though the same amount is in focus, you can actually see much more of the background. So the focal length is going to affect your depth of field as well. Not only how much is in focus, but how much you see of that background. So that's something to keep in mind as well. And then we're going to run through these focal lengths pretty quickly again, just so you see the difference of what we're able to capture. And I'm actually going to, for good measure, get right up in there. Now this is a good one if you really want to get up close and personal and get a good headshot, but still have some of the background in. You're able to do it like this, and I actually really like this type of shooting. But let's go ahead. I'm going to take a step back, keep that frame the same. Cross your arms for me, Ryan, again. Good man, I dig it. All right, f1.8 down to f2.8. What we were shooting at the 70-200, f4, 5.6, f8, f11, f16. And you heard at f16 there's a little bit of a shutter delay because we're all the way down at 1/20th of a second. So if your light is dipping down and you want to catch a lot of the field in focus, well, you're probably going to need a tripod or a stabilized lens. This isn't, but we can always switch over to the 24-70 and get that stabilization. But this is some pretty cool stuff. I'm pretty happy so far. All right, so now we're going to show you some of the similar effects that you can get with a typical kit lens that you'll have. Because when you first start off shooting, you're not going to have an f2.8 lens unless, you know, you sell it and buy it right away. You know what you're looking for. But a lot of times when you just start off, you're going to have an 18-55 variable aperture lens. We're actually shooting on one right here. So the quality is good, but you're going to be a little more limited with your aperture. So This is our Tamron 17 to 50, and we're gonna shoot at f5.6, but then show you how much the distance is going to affect your depth of field. So you can actually get some, fairly blurred out backgrounds if you frame everything right. So we're gonna shoot at 50, which is about what you'll have the same equivalents. So we're gonna shoot at 50 f5.6 and show you how much of a shallow depth of field you can get with just the normal kit lens. So I'm gonna get right up on you, Ryan. We'll do the, give me this, and we'll shoot this first so that you can see the same type of framing. So we get a little bit of the background blur, but then we're getting closer. So we got a tighter headshot, background is disappearing, and then this is a pretty intimate portrait here, you could say, but you're still able to get a very shallow depth of field. You just got to get a little bit closer to your subject, even at f5.6. So you see what f5.6 looks like. Let's drop it back down to f2.8. So you see the comparisons. Even parts of his cheek are starting to fall out of focus at f2.8. So you almost totally lose the background, but then you're actually starting to work off of facial features being in and out of focus. So that's definitely something to be aware of when you're shooting the long lens, because you might have focused on their nose, but the iris is then out of focus because it's such a shallow depth of field at that point. And the same can go for a 50mm 1.8. You've got such a shallow depth of field that you're working with right there that focus becomes absolutely critical. So that's another thing to keep in mind with all this stuff too. So if you want a little more flexibility, stop down f3.5, f5.6. Make sure that you got a sharp focus. Chimp, go ahead, look, make sure, because otherwise you can miss a shot.
You don't want that.
All right, so I hope that gives you a little bit of an idea of how depth of field is going to work in your typical shooting. So whether it's portraits or landscapes, you're going to want different stuff going on. And if you want to refer back to our other video of when we shot landscapes with all your different lenses, that's going to give you a good explanation too of how depth of field is going to work for a landscape shoot. And here we're going to go through and give you a little bit of what it's going to feel like on a portrait shoot. So there's different things that you want for different types of shoots, right? So if you want a long depth of field because you're shooting a wedding and you want to get the background in, let's say their venue, they're really partial to their venue, stop down, make sure you get that all in focus. Do whatever you got to do to get that shot for your client. But this is a good explanation of how to do all of that. So thanks for joining us. Like, subscribe, and message us with any of your questions. We're happy to answer them. Remember, Wagner does shots on the Facebook and Wagner does shots on YouTube. Check us out there. Thanks a lot.